Yeah.
Have you on?
Oh, hold on here.
No, I'm just
Don't
checking.
worry.
I'll
No.
edit later, no worries.
It's chopping out a little bit actually, but my computer was telling me about the recording. So say something again so I can make sure I got a good connection.
Well, we will hope that our internet here behaves, as it can be a bit dicey.
Yeah, it was. There's a little bit of buzziness in there, but we'll make do, I think.
I
Okay.
think we'll work it out.
So
If it's not your internet, it'd be my internet, so it'll be fine. I'm off.
yeah, Andy lives in the bush, so his internet is even worse than ours. We're in Nairobi, so
Right on.
ours is generally a bit better.
Do you have to use a booster, Andy, of some sort?
I have a satellite dish.
Okay.
Use satellite internet.
Wow.
So it's expensive for super slow, narrow bandwidth.
Uh-huh. You got to do what you got to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm getting ready to. I'm building out my trailer to go back on the road with my dogs. I was on a kind of a seminar tour.
Oh, nice.
I remember your trailer from before. It's pretty epic. You know.
Say it again.
Is it the same trailers you've had before?
Before I had a truck. Well, I've had pretty much every different kind of RV.
Yeah.
I had a truck camper before, and I like that. I like that
one.
demo. This is actually it's a trailer that I had to seek out because it's extra tall, so I can put my home gym in the back of it.
Whoa.
And then I configured it. Well, yeah, it'll be pretty cool. I got to take the whole thing apart, of course, and then build it and mount it in there. But then, see, the advantage is, and I've done this in different configurations. I had a Class A RV, which is the real big ones, and I had a gym in there. I could probably send you guys a picture, actually.
Yeah.
Let me see. I can probably find it right now since we're on it, because I know I sent it to someone not long ago. So I wrote an article.
So cool. Wow.
Oh, it was, yeah. There we go. I think it's so strange. Let me see if I can get it to pop up this way. Always juggling so many devices. I sent the picture to someone on my computer and it doesn't show up, but it shows up on my phone when I look at my messages. So I'll just send it back to myself and then I'll send it to you guys.
Yeah.
But it's so convenient because you're traveling along, and if I'm, depending on how far I need to go or where I plan to stop, if it's a day I'm going to train, well, then I got to stop. I got to hook up the water, the electric, usually walk the dogs, et cetera. And then I unhook my car, depending on how I was set up, and then drive to the gym, find the gym. It's not always the easiest thing. Hopefully there's one close. This, I just pull up, take care of the pups, and I go and train. I'm in the gym, basically.
Yeah,
and it's
awesome.
Amazing. Yeah, it's really cool. So
I've never heard of like anyone doing that with a gym. I think that's such a great idea.
It's my $1 million idea that I keep sharing with people. But the RV industry, I mean, at least here in the States, these are people who they've worked their butts off so they can finally retire and do what they want to do and travel.
Yeah.
And they have a ton of disposable income. And these are older people too. I mean, I have a graduate certificate in gerontology. I have a keen interest in where exercise. I mean, bodybuilding is, can be very superficial. It's about how you look, blah, blah, blah. There's other benefits, of course, but for older folks, especially in the States where we're so sedentary, who are, suffering potentially from diseases of sedentary living, osteoporosis is coming into play, sarcopenia, et cetera, et cetera. Weight training is really kind of a panacea in many ways. And so they get on the road and they want to kind of change their lives and feel more healthy and feel more vibrant. And I saw this even happen with my dad. And they buy these, I mean, some of these RVs are just outrageous. $250,000, $100,000 is an easy spend. And because people they normally would buy a vacation home with the money they pocketed away. But now they buy a $250,000 RV, and they're maybe, depending on how they're doing it, but just having some kind of a system to put in those gyms, a weight training system, because they don't have those at RV parks.
Yeah.
So my idea would be like something for those folks, for truck drivers who are even worse. They're on their butts all the time. and then maybe set up some kind of a system like you sell to like a, you know, like maybe like a $10,000 like mini gym that like 2 people could use at a time at an RV park. Kind of like, you know, they have washing machines there.
Yeah.
Same thing to put them at the truck stops. So the truckers go, they know exactly what they're getting. They do their full body workout, computerized system. They're like, okay, you know, John, this is what you need to do. Like today, let's see if we can get 2 more reps with this. Kind of coaches them through, tracks them. It's like, it's been 6 days, you know, they get a notification on their phone. Hey, there's a gym here at the travel stop coming up in 35 miles. Do you need gas? Don't you need to work out too?
Yeah.
You know?
More important.
So, yeah. Anyway, it's a totally untapped market so far.
Well, I can really imagine, because we have a lot of long haul truck drivers here as well. And they are so unhealthy.
I'm sure, yeah.
Oh,
They just literally sit and eat.
Anyway,
And drink.
And look for hookers.
I just send you guys in the chat a picture,
Oh, cool. Let's see.
and it's from my old gym. I had to get rid of that one. It's all kind of a long story, but which pained me. I don't know if you can. I don't see the thumbnail. I just see image. And that's the back end of the gym. It was a toy hauler, so that's normally where people put like motorcycles or 4-wheelers. You guys see it?
Hang on, we're just
Okay.
making it to the.
Downloading it.
There it is. Oh wow!
oh, geez,
That
man,
is-
this is good.
Yeah,
That's so impressive. That
it was awesome. Yeah.
And you've got everything you need there.
Yeah, I have I don't know if you can see there. I have a pulley system up top, so I could do pull downs.
Yeah.
Fully adjustable bench. I could do knee extensions, hamstring curls on that bench. I could do, you know, tricep press downs, pull downs with the pulley that I put in.
So
I
now-
had
right.
Olympic handle dumbbells, so I had like 2,000 pounds with me or something. Like actually, I think I had 1,200 pounds in there. So I had like either 4 or 6 of my 100-pound plates just for like doing deadlifts and like, you know, heavy stuff. And it was brilliant. It was great.
Because like we have a home gym in a container, and Andy's also got a home gym. So we're always looking at like how you can maximize space and like what do you really need, kind of thing.
I tell you what, I mean, I don't know if we could I can put this on the podcast. The thing that I'm working out, and I've got like one contingency kind of setting my timeline, but I want to try to do, because see, planning out this, all of what I'm doing with this trailer, I've got a weight limit with the trailer. Unless I want to add an axle or something like that, get a trailer. And so I want to minimize the weight, and because I'm privy, because I geek out and I like to read the exercise physiology literature, there's a whole wealth of literature on flywheel training, which you guys might be aware of. They're very aware of it in Europe. I'm aware of it originally. You guys know anything about flywheel training?
I've only seen one at one CrossFit gym here, and a lot of the rugby guys and football guys use it. That's
right.
Yeah, they're the ones who seem to use it a lot.
Yeah. So there's major ergogenic performance enhancements that can come from training in this way. And basically what you do is you usually you start a set with an easy rep, but the harder you pull, the greater the inertia that's brought in the flywheel, and the more you get back.
Yeah.
And it's
so
pretty much
I've seen it in the UK, and actually when I was in the police in the UK, our fitness test used to use the same system. Where you push, it get hard. It would measure how strong you were based off the inertia.
Yeah, you cut out there, but I think I followed you. Yeah, it's it'll you can measure all that. You probably use the eccentric system. They're the best ones, I think. Either that or Pear-Tesh's system. Yeah. But what I'm gonna do, and those guys may lend me, the eccentric people. They've been doing it for like 10 years.
Nice.
Pear-Tesh is kind of the guy who brought this, kind of brought it into the literature, and he's done all sorts of cool stuff. It was for NASA, basically, where they sort of invigorated that, because you can't lift weights in space because there's no weight, right? But you still have laws of physics. You can still create inertia with a heavy flywheel.
Yeah.
So That's where that literature comes from. And those things weigh like nothing. You just put them in. And what I'm going to do, I have an Iron Master system. That's not what you see there. It's Iron Master. You might want to check it out. It does everything basically.
Yeah.
You can do inverted leg presses, and it's a super duper Smith machine.
Okay.
The customer service has been really awful with them lately. I really want to help them because I've had this system for 15 years, but the guy that I've spoken with, it's almost as if I'm on candid camera, and he's like, every time I say I'm going to do something for Scott, I'm not going to do it. Like literally every time. He never follows through on anything. But I want to take that system, and I think that can do this. And so attach that to the bar of the Iron Master. So let's say I do an incline press with 2 plates on a side. So 100 kilos or what have you. And so now instead of having to haul around the weight to do that, I put half the load on there, 1 plate on a side, and I connect a flywheel on either side. So I press up, and the thing with the flywheel is you drive into it, and then when you change directions, there's a dip in the load that it gives you. Mm-hmm. Normally, and you can see that in the torque traces from the literature. You can see it if you watch the videos. There's tons of them out there. So like you can buy knee extension machines. You drive up, and before you get the load bringing you back down, there's a little bit of basically it's inertia that has to flip direction when the machine changes the direction of the torque on you. But you can sidestep that if you have some load on the bar. So if I just use the flywheels, you drive up and then you have to wait for it to catch and then come back down. Yeah. But if I have a load on the bar and the flywheel, I have the harder I push, the more it comes back at me, and I've got a load at the top. So I change the loading curve. Yeah. And I get the advantage.
It's almost like banding.
It's like banding, but better. Yeah. That's the idea. And it gives a whole nother dimension to progressive overload potentially.
Yeah. Well, we'll look into that.
Yeah, I mean, because you can do all sorts of things with that. So they're expensive. They're not cheap.
No, that's
the good stuff isn't, but that's okay.
Yeah, because even the flywheel is an international Kenyan footballer. He makes good money, so he came with it. It's his personal one, so he puts it at the gym for other athletes to sort of use. So
interesting. Is it a box you stand on?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's probably the K box. That's probably eccentric.
Yeah,
I would guess.
Because I've seen them use. I've never tried because I just see rugby players and football, basketball guys use it a lot. So
if you use your phone, you can measure your output and have an idea like where you're going, and try to improve your performance. Mm. They've got one system that doesn't have the meter on it, so you can't really see what you've done. But they call it the K pulley go. Yeah. And it's like this big, and you strap it. You can strap it on anything. You can put it on a tree. You can put it on a telephone pole. You can put the side of your car. As long as you got something stable, and you can just do side pulling movements, rowing movements, whatever you want. You get 2 of them, you can do like pressing movements. Yeah. And it's just like banding, but it's got that pulley action to it. So it's a different loading curve. Yeah. So anyway, that's a sidetrack that,
No, I like it. Yeah. No, but that would be interesting to talk about in the actual podcast. Also, I
just use that bit clear. Just do an intro now.
Yeah, let's go. We'll just roll.
Just keep it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a good thing I was recording.
Well, I wasn't sure if I wanted to because I haven't worked out exactly what I would do with that company, so I don't want to kind of advertise.
No one steal Scott's idea.
Yeah,
I don't care about that, the idea, and the Iron Master folks, I really wanted to work with them. The guy just made it's like, man, it's like the 8th time you're not, I have to call him, and he's like, I sent you an email. I'm like, no, you didn't. No, you say that's the 4th time you use excuse. It doesn't work anymore.
No. Okay.
Yeah, we're ready.
Everybody ready?
Let's do it.
Okay. Welcome to season 6, episode 9 of the podcast. And today we are truly honored to be joined by Dr. Scott Stevenson. Scott is well known in the bodybuilding world with over 30 years in the gym and 2 decades of personal training and online coaching experience. Not only is Scott a bodybuilder, but holds a PhD, is a licensed acupuncturist, educator, which covers many things, and lover of dogs. And like you were just saying, you've been on the road with your dogs, and I must say, I find most bodybuilders love dogs, and it's just
everyone here is a super dog.
Yeah.
What kind of dogs do you have, Scott?
They are all spoiled mixes. I have a Jack in the Box, a Jack Russell boxer mix.
Nice.
Nice.
Yeah. So
That's
she
a crazy
looks
dog for sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah. She's a maniac. She's a little nutball. And I have a black lab bloodhound mix named Blitzy. So she's got a classic bloodhound coat coloration. There's a sagittal crest on the head of bloodhounds you can kind of feel. So that's kind of, I just can kind of, and she got a little bit of the bagginess in her eyes, but she's got the webbed feet and she has the body of a black lab. And my other dog, her name is Foxy, and she looks very much like a fox. A lot of people think she looks like she could be part Shiba Inu. And it's so funny. Like Suki is a boxer mix. I'm pretty sure about that. But boxers and pits have a common ancestor. Bullenbeißer is the name of the dog. And so people who have staffies, it's like, oh, she's a staffy. I'm like, I think she's a boxer. And people who have boxers say, oh, she's a boxer. I'm like, I think boxer. And people who have Shiba Inu see fox, like, oh, she's a Shibu. And I'm like, could be. And I downloaded an app. Someone mentioned this to me. It's called Dog Scanner. You can get it for the iPhone at least.
Okay.
Just take a picture of your dog, and it'll guess at the mix. And it pulled up Nordic Buhund, which I'd never heard of.
Yeah. No, they go puffin hunting. They're puffin hunting dog, and they've got a head that can almost twist right round. They've got like really flexible neck.
The Buhund is you cut out a little bit.
Yeah, I was saying they're a puffin hunting dog with a flexible neck.
That's what the Buhund is, or
yes.
Oh, okay. I was going to. That's the funny thing. She looks exactly like a Nordic Buhund. I didn't know they were bred to hunt puffins, but
there's a real usage.
Yeah. Well, I went on the Facebook groups. I'm like, I learned this breed because I'm so certain. Literally, the first picture that pops up looks almost exactly like her, except she has a black streak. So, but it's a very specific breed. You're the first person I've ever mentioned this to who had any idea what kind of dog that was.
I'm on the Kennel Club committee in Kenya. I'm all about the dogs.
Oh,
okay.
I have loads of dogs. All right. Well, you'll appreciate this story, and it didn't offend me at all. I kind of thought it might happen, but she's a rescue. All my dogs are rescues. I found her. Yeah. Kind of a cool story, actually, which I could tell you guys if you want. But so I'm like, okay, so I think I have a mix, which probably is in itself an offense because she's a mix of a very pure specific breed. And I posted a video of her playing with Suki. They play like maniacs, and immediately 10, 12, 15 responses. It's like, no, you don't have a Buhund. Like, there's just no way. It's impossible. It couldn't be. There's no breeder really around me in Florida. There's no, logical way that could possibly, she's just a husky mix of some sort, They immediately rejected it out of sorts because like, this is just can't be that you'd have. And that kind of made sense to me, but she looked so much like the Buhund breed, and you can have convergence there in terms of how they look. So that was funny. So I left those groups because I'm like, if I ever post a question, they're gonna be like, well, who? Well, you don't even have one, so like, why are you asking? But so that's my crazy crew, and
love it.
Awesome.
Yeah, they're wonderful.
Love it. Well, so Leon and I have just started Fortitude training, and
oh, really?
Yeah, we've been ever since we had Scott, the other Scott McNally on, and we were like, oh well, we'd been doing JP's training, and we were like,
And JP is all about Scott Stevenson. So
we were like, well, let's try
Very kind that way.
Fortitude. And let's just say we're in pain today. It's brutal.
It's week 2, and it's one of those like, man, should we, start taking it down already? But we're
Which
enjoying.
volume tier are you doing?
Oh, what? No, 2.
Two.
Okay.
We decided to. We wanted to start at 3, but we said let's follow the, let's be smart with it.
Go. I don't know that I saw your purchase if you guys bought it, but like if you buy it, I've got a free board where I've answered questions ever since the start, and I always recommend just to get the feel of things and then go from there, because on very much like I've been training for a while. I'm a maniac. I'm an animal, and people go, and I know and the thing is that the sort of the ironic part of that is the people who have that mentality tend to be the people who train the hardest and who can't handle tier 3 volume wise because they train so hard. And so I suggest tier 1 to start and then move up, and then you could just auto regulate. But if you're staying too sore and you're still 2 feet up, then pull it back to tier 1. Tier 1's totally fine.
Yeah, no. Well, this is only week 2.
Yeah, it's week 2. It's good so far.
We're really enjoying it. And like we were just discussing before the podcast started, we only have free weights pretty much. So it's that can be a bit tricky because like for some of the pump sets and everything, it would be nice to have machines for that. We
have a cable and free weights.
You can't actually do, since the pump sets, I mean, I kind of leave it, it's dealer's choice, so to speak. You don't have to you can just make note of what you did. Like Jordan, for instance, he wanted to progressively overload everything.
Yeah.
So he would just do high rep straight sets on the pump sets, and he wanted to record those and logbook those. But I intentionally set it up if someone's being very diligent with their logbooking on the loading sets and the muscle rounds even too. The pump sets can be totally auto-regulated based on how you feel, even like going throughout the set. Sometimes you'll just be like, you know what, I'm doing this, I'm getting a little bit of a pump here, but I can just feel my tendons are not particularly happy with me. You don't have to do you could use bands for a pump set.
Yeah.
And I have some old videos in my backyard when the pandemic first happened, when we talked about being on the road. My truck broke down. I was about 2 weeks, I was stuck in Illinois, and I just had a field and bands to train with. And there's about, I don't know, 10 videos of me just figuring stuff out. I just picked up the heavy things I could find. Yeah. Like there was a long metal pole that I used to attach the bands to, and I stood on the bands. If you saw those videos, people like this.
I remember watching them and thinking, because like JP used to say, you're crazy, and I'd watch you with the bands, and I'm like, he's killing himself. Like it's just bands, but I watch them. Right.
So you can do that. There, I just take 2 sets of bands, and if you have a tree or like your power rack, maybe one of you would stand on the rack so you don't pull it over. But hook that to either side of and you can do a movement. You can do a pull down movement. You can do a bent over rowing movement that way. Just with the bands, and you're just literally just trying to create a fatiguing effect there. And utilize that, and you'll know, like, you guys have been training long enough that you'll know when you've really whacked the muscle, and then you're done. And then
we're keeping the pump sets light, so it's we're following the instructions. We're not trying to, because it's when you start, it's like you write down the program and you're like, only this. Okay.
Right.
Then,
some people find, and it's sort of their mindset, and they have to auto-regulate around it. And this is why I did this sort of intentionally, that the pump sets are the hardest for them, because there's sort of no limit. Like, you can just keep the set going until there's absolutely nothing left in the tank. So some guys think that pump sets for legs on day 2, it would be in the normal program, are the hardest thing that they do. So they have to auto-regulate around that. So yeah, but the way you're doing is totally fine too. As long as you're seeing progression in the right direction, then it's a win.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
the people who are listening who don't know about Fortitude training, Scott, could you just take us through sort of how you came to it, and just a bit of your background as well?
Yeah, so we have to go back to the Stone Ages here.
Oh, I love that.
When I scribbled my notes on tablets, with made of stone, chiseled them out, in Arabic. So I had preceding Fortitude training. I'd been doing DC training for a long time. At that time, Dante had stopped coaching people, and some circumstances led to me being kind of the official DC trainer for a while. And that is DC training, as you find it online, is a great program. But what Dante does is de facto DC training, and he gave me some levity too to do things. So I had figured out through years of experiencing doing that and working around some of my own injuries, that there were certain things that were lended itself better for me making progress, and even ways of sort of staying with the confines. Someone comes to me to DC training, I'm going to stick with what Dante has to say. But he gave me lots of levity there. So I learned a lot in sort of using that as a base model. And then I found a system called Titan Training by Leo Costa. I'll always give him credit. That's why I even use the term muscle rounds for that type of cluster set. That might be a question we get to. Dante had done the same thing, a rest pause set. People don't necessarily know this, but he used that term because he knew that part of the idea for how he configured that cluster set came from Mike Mentzer, who had used that term. It was a totally different set. It was like 6 singles or something like that, with 30 seconds rest in between. People can Google and find that. But he didn't want to be someone who was stealing ideas from someone, so he gave credit. So I had done the Titan training, and the way I wasn't able to really decipher exactly how the sets should be terminated. So I wavered on the side of going as hard as humanly possible, and literally destroyed myself. I put myself, first time in 20 plus years at that point, I truly overtrained myself. And his clusters, his muscle rounds, for instance, and I can't tell, even look back at the book, and he really didn't say how to configure them, but they were 6 sets of 4. And this is not for those listening, this is not how you do a Fortitude training muscle round. This is what I did with his. And he said, you just progressively drop the weight. You do sets of 4. And I can't remember even if he said 5 breaths or 10 seconds. He may have said one or the other. And I configured that specifically. So it'd be a known set rest interval. And I might do and he didn't care about what exercises. So I would pick, I'm going to do deadlifts. And I do something I could barely get 4 with, rest 10 seconds, and then do a double, and the double's and then, so that might be or maybe it's, let's say it's rack dead. So it might be literally 7 plates at the time for a set of 4, and then a double. And I go to 6 plates, and I do a set of 4, and then I do a set of 3, and then I go to 5 plates and do a set of 4, and then a set of, maybe I get, 4 to failure again. So I had to have 3 failure points. And he was loading up 11 or 12 of those in a workout. And I was doing that, and I can't remember exactly how the program went, but obviously that was way too much.
Yeah.
So one thing I learned there, which I knew from DC training, from doing Widowmakers too, which is, and I bring this up, it's sort of an important way I tried to configure Fortitude training, was that there's there's a law of diminishing returns in terms of recovery and stimulus that you get when you take sets truly to failure. So I set up everything in the Fortitude training with keeping that idea in mind. So if you do a set of 9 reps with a weight that you could have gotten 10 with, you've gotten a lot out of those 9 reps. So this is even before the idea of reps in reserve was even out there. I sort of was using that concept in the training. I just said, leave 1 or 2 reps in a tank. I didn't use RER. By the way, nothing really is ever with more than 2 reps in reserve in Fortitude training. There's no 5 reps in reserve. It's only for the sake of what's convenient and makes logical sense, not taking a weight to failure and then having to re-rack to bring the weight back to the beginning point. But I realized that you take a set to failure, and that has a dramatic effect on what you do thereafter. So I took what I learned from Titan training, and I made really good progress for the first, I think, 4 or 5 weeks until I started doing too much. But it was a very high frequency program. And I took what I learned from DC training, what I learned from, the years before that. And also I took from the scientific literature some things I picked up on and figured out with clients it worked well. And I took those ingredients, and the recipe of Fortitude training was born from that. But there's multiple ways that you could take those ingredients and make a different program. So for Fortitude training, the idea was, one, be wary of failure points, but having those is important. So I think, taking sets to where you really push yourself to failure so you can monitor progressive overload is important. A big issue with reps and reserve style training is, especially if someone maybe goes for 10 or 12 weeks and they never really take a set to true failure, they don't learn how to exist in that I'm actually going to take this set to where I truly fail. And of course, it always should be safely done in a rack, the partner, what have you, with a spot. So it's hard to know. And you also don't get some experience there. There's something, I think, there's a very unique learning state that occurs when you get into that place where you've got a big heavy load on your back, or you're picking up something that, is just feels enormously heavy, to continue to persist for those 5-8 seconds. There's a mental, call it fortitude, sorry for the pun, but there's something to be learned from that. But also you just can't go there and take sets to failure ad nauseum and continue to recover. So that was one theme. Another theme was, and I built this into the set types, that you can grow from heavy weights and you can grow from lighter weights. So those are the loading sets that are traditionally very DC training like in their construction, that you logbook, and you come in on the days when you do those loading sets, and the logbook is going to be your biatch that day. You're going after it, you're taking it down, and you're owning it. And on the other days, there can be progressive overload as well. The pump sets, which we were talking about before, maybe not so much, but you can grow from very, very light weights, relatively speaking. There's sort of a landscape of hypertrophy. 30% of a 1 rep max can be used to create muscle growth. So take advantage of that. And I sort of generalized the program. There's probably, I haven't seen this exposed in the literature, but there's more than likely some spectrum of adaptation whereby some people grow really well from big heavy weights, and some people can do really, really well from lighter, more pump style training. And we see that, for instance, with Jordan, big heavy weights serve him very, very well. And if you look at a lot of pros who get very, very strong too, but there are examples of pros who had phenomenal physiques, who never were tremendously strong, who just did a lot of volume, a lot of pump style training, like with the pro split or the bro split. So I've got both of those stimuli in there, in those two set types. And then I included, I think one of the questions maybe for today was a cluster set. And I liked the muscle round format. Just there's a million ways you could do this. 6 sets of 4 is not a magical combination that I came up with, that I had to sacrifice something to the gods to get like the magic numbers. This is the way the astrologers put this together. This will make you grow. It could be 5 sets of 3. It could be 3 sets. Dante does 3 sets to failure for a rest pause set with a rep range in between there. So what I wanted to do, especially it's easier to look at the muscle rounds as a way to sort of pull this idea out, was take advantage of something that I'd sort of figured out. The literature is there. There's a really kind of nice way of piecing together the research literature to see this phenomenon. But the limitation for us in terms of producing muscle growth by training in the gym probably isn't in what the muscle can handle loading wise. I think it's more a matter of what happens psychologically and what that means in terms of our endocrine responses, the nervous system, probably the immune system too. So you'll get sick. If you're natural, you'll have elevated cortisol, your testosterone levels will go down if you're a guy especially. You'll end up having adverse effects on the systems of recovery. but the muscle can grow really, really well. And if we look at that idea that the greatest impact on those recovery resources comes from those failure points, which are important, but if you overdo it, you can shoot yourself in the foot.
Yeah.
The idea then would be, and this is where the reps in reserve notion is a nice way to sort of examine this, is that load the muscle with lots of volume, high quality reps coming close to failure, but minimize also those failure points. So as the example in the muscle round, you would do sets of what are supposed to be 4 reps. And this is where literally it's maybe 1 or 2% of the people who post muscle rounds on Instagram. I've had like a couple people now like come up to the challenge and actually describe them properly. And I've got a whole video. It's a 40-minute video, I think, on YouTube on how to do a muscle round. You guys could maybe link it in the show notes.
Yeah, we will.
Yeah, but the idea is you're picking a load. If the first time you've done this, it's maybe a 15 rep max. So that's kind of your loading zone. Loading sets would be heavier, pump sets would be lighter. So this is the one that's in the middle on the loading spectrum. And this will allow you to get hopefully 3 sets of 4, and you're using about a 1-to-1 work to rest ratio. So that's 5 breaths. If you can control your breathing enough to make that pretty consistent. If you're training legs, you might want to use a watch because you're going to be breathing very fast, and those rest intervals are going to fly by. And then let's say you might do 5 breaths or 10 seconds, 4, rest, 4, and then you go to failure safely with a machine or with a spot, so you can climb out of there and start again. The idea is you're going to do 6 sets total. So you get 2 reps on that 4th set. That would be your only failure point. So, but there's still more to be had. We can still keep the volume pretty close to what each muscle round is by doing 6 sets. You would just drop the load down, so you can then do 2 more sets. Those are going to be very high quality reps because you're pretty close to failure, but you're not going to failure again. So imagine the scenario where, like, let's say you do 4, 4, 4, and 2. And then you're like, you know what? I'm going to just destroy myself. You drop down the weight and you go to failure again. You drop down the weight and you do it a failure again. You like a triple drop set, or you just drop down the weight once and you have 3 failure points. That's going to be categorically different than what I've sort of set the muscle rounds up to be, where you go to failure only once in the set. Could be the 4th, it could be the 5th. It doesn't, just an example, it happened to fall on that 4th. Yeah. Then you drop the weight down, and then you recenter yourself, make sure you got good tempo, perfect form, mind muscle connection is dialed in, laser like focus. And then you do the best high quality reps you can with a lowered load, like 20 to 30% lower than what you had started the muscle round with. And that way you've accumulated the volume, and you've got lots of those high quality reps, putting the focus on the muscle, which can handle lots of volume, and not going into that failure point, which are the ones that really kind of whack you and leave you feeling like, okay, I'm not doing anything the rest of the day because I just kind of destroyed my CNS. So that's how I set up the muscle round. So those are they kind of fall in the in-between zone. Some people live and die by progressive overload, so they might take on the day they do those in the system. And this is something I mention this because people use muscle rounds in their other system, and I don't mind at all. I actually like it if people beg and borrow these ideas, because that's the purpose, to help people. Is they would have a muscle round day, or you have a muscle round day in Fortitude training, and it might be, you know what, I'm going to pick this lat pull down machine or this leg press, and every week when I come through, I'm going to try to destroy this thing until I plateau. So I might get 4, 4, 4, and 2. The next week I come back, I get 4, 4, 4, 4, and then I get just 2 again, drop down. You pound away at that weight until you can get 6 sets of 4, only 1 failure point. So if you can get more than 4 in that 6th set, you keep going. Sometimes people I've seen like, let's just 6 sets of 4. This is where I kind of laugh at this. It just says 6 sets of 4, and like, well, what if you picked a really light weight? You just like to do 6 sets of 4, like, okay, we're done. Did a muscle round. It's like, I use the pink dumbbells and do curls and just be done. Though the idea is to pick a stimulating load. But if you do, for instance, under guess your weight, which may happen, you'll get good at this after a while. It's pretty pretty easy to pick up on.
Yeah.
Someone would take that last set all the way to failure. So if you, for instance, you get 4 reps on the 6th set, and that's all you could do, that's a world of difference between getting 14 reps. You're like, okay, I really need to move the load up a bit. So one person might, same exercise, progress their way through the muscle round. Once they get 6 sets of 4, add load, and keep doing that until they plateau and they say, okay, I did 5 months of this leg press. Now we're going to do another exercise. Someone else might be like, you know what? I need some variety. I like to challenge myself. And this is kind of what I suggest in the book, is they have a pool of muscle round exercises for each muscle group or each muscle. And like, okay, today I'm going to do this one. And it's like, it's the hamstring standing squat. I did that 4 weeks ago. I'm going to whip my own ass. I'm going to beat what I did then with this. And that's fun. Like, it's like the lottery of challenges on that day, but it's still progress.
Mm-hmm.
So, and motivation, like having fun in the gym it's so important. Like the world of difference between like, I really don't want to do this, that you can see that in if you have trainees you work with, it's solely different between that and like, oh, I can't wait to dig in on this because I know I've gotten stronger on almost everything since then. And I know I'm going to make that previous PR look like nothing when I get under the load this time. So those are the components: a heavy loading, a higher rep type of thing, and then a cluster set, which gives you more volume with minimal adverse effects on the nervous system, endocrine system, immune system. And then variability in recovery resources is huge, as well as how people do with frequency too. So I've got different volume tiers. There's a basic and a turbo version. The basic version, you train everything about 3 times a week. And the turbo version, everything is about 4 times a week. So that's pretty high frequency. And I've had people come to me. There's been a couple of really kind of funny instances where people are like, okay, I like you to actually train me or coach me. And we're going to try to bring up my legs, for instance. And I'm like, okay, well, what I think we might do, given you've never done high frequency, let's start doing legs like 3 times a week. Doesn't have to be Fortitude training, just a higher frequency program, because you might not have tried that. And they're like, what? Like, you can't do that. I'm like, we're not talking 20 sets. We're not going to do a Ronnie Coleman leg workout 3 times a week. It's going to be like just a few sets, so that you can recover appropriately and take advantage of that frequency. And there's a whole story on why I think some people, and there's some interesting research that I talk about. It seems like almost every podcast, but it's so good. Actually, it's so important that some people are going to do better with higher frequency and some people are going to do better with lower frequency. And same thing goes for volume as well. Yeah. So I built that into the program. I had a kind of a group of beta testers when I created this, just to kind of work out as many kinks as I could before I actually put the book out. And I had 2 guys in the beta testing group. One guy was, he was a really good coach, but did not have good genetics for bodybuilding. He tended to harbor a lot of body fat, didn't grow muscle really well, but he could handle a ton of volume. He was a workhorse. Yeah. And the other guy actually was a pro wrestler, had a really good physique, and was an absolute animal in the gym. The first guy could train with volume tier 3 and recover. And he had to he could train that all the way through to a show. And he wanted to like have that kind of volume just so he could have a little bit extra caloric expenditure so he could create the deficit necessary to drop body fat. The other guy's like, it's like, man, I'm going to have to do an all you can eat day, all day Sunday, just to handle the volume recovery from volume tier 1. But for him, like those sets, the pump sets, the loading sets, those were all death sets. Like his life and the life of his entire lineage is on the line unless he just destroys the weight there. Yeah. So, different recovery resources. And, so there's so many variations there in how people respond to those things. So I built that into the program too. And that's something I think that isn't made probably appreciated. And I mean, this could go off on a kind of a soapbox, but if you pick a program you know, that program may work for 50% of the people, but the other 50% of the people it won't work for. So you go and like, so how well does program X work? And it's like, it was worked awesome for me. It's great. It's like, it didn't work for me at all. That's very confusing, right? But that's just how it is. It's like asking, like, what's the best flavor of ice cream? It's like chocolate, vanilla, strawberry. It's like, like there's no one size fits all answer to that. It's preference. In this case, what fits so many aspects of how you train and how you recover, your genetics, maybe even your epigenetics, your lifestyle, etc. So having some built-in flexibility so there can be some form of auto regulation in there is part of it. And the other thing I guess I'll add, so these are the ingredients. So we've got different volume tiers, we got different frequency, we've got auto regulation of exercises too. So it's not like you must squat, you must deadlift, you must bench, none of that. It's pick what works for you. The different rep ranges, the different set types to keep things nice and variable and fun. So it has to be fun. Like literally you could take a pretty crappy, poorly devised program and make it fun, you know, and like if someone were hypnotized into thinking this is just going to be the greatest day ever, and it's really kind of an asinine program, they're going to do well. They're going to make progress, you know, to some degree, I would imagine, as opposed to someone who really doesn't want to be there. And also stretches. So one of the things that came from DC training was the extreme stretches, and that's you know, give Dante full credit there. There's literally research that substantiates this idea. So an extreme stretch, the way DC training set that up, is you'd finish your training of a muscle group and you stretch after, not before. That can impair your performance in the gym possibly if you were to overstretch. And you would do typically a weighted stretch. They're a loaded stretch. You might hold a dumbbell in a fly position, or you might do like a stiff-legged deadlift with, you know, a weight on the bar, and you hold that for 60 to 90 seconds. So you're doing a prolonged isometric contraction. That's creating a metabolic stress. There's a blood flow restriction that's involved there because you literally are not going to get any blood into a muscle that's producing contractions of that magnitude. And that's another stimulus for growth. And what I did was, but I wanted to make that something that can be auto-regulated too, because I know from having done the DC training, there'd be some days like you guys, like now, if you're feeling really sore, you make it through your workout, you don't necessarily like, oh my God, like I feel like, you know, if I stretch too much, I'm going to tear something. That's not the smart day to go try to pick up the heaviest dumbbells you have and do it really, no. So you can do on that day just a flexibility stretch, literally just work through a range of motion, work out the kinks. You've got plenty of stimulus. Your recovery is already sort of on the downside. Leave things alone. Use the stretch just to at least sort of refresh the connective tissue memory, so to speak. I mean, there's not a mechanism per se, but literally there is some, there to some extent, connective tissue will remodel itself based on its resting length in skeletal muscle. You see that in casted muscle. You see that in people who sit like this at their desk all the time because they're working, you know, their posture will change based on how they are. So it's not a bad idea, especially if you're someone who works the computer a lot, for instance, to do a pec stretch periodically throughout the day. You know, if you get, and I've noticed this too, this is sort of a bro experience. Let's say you train legs and your legs are just constantly sore. You don't tend to squat down to pick things up as much. You move very differently, right? So you know this phenomenon. You're dive bombing. You're kamikaze dive bombing the toilet every time you go to the bathroom. You know, that kind of thing. But so stretching is something that's definitely minimized in the course of someone's life. Or maybe if they don't stretch when they even before they train, they're only stretching and maybe getting through some of that range of motion comes through the actual resistance training. So I think it just makes sense. The literature doesn't say, you know, stretching prevents injury, what have you, but it just makes sense to have some stretching component in there, just to realize that. So I created kind of 3 stretches. There's an extreme stretch. If you're feeling like, you know what, I'm still aggressive with this, I'm going to do a heavy DC style extreme stretch after I've trained a muscle group for the day. That would be one choice. If you're really sore, recovery's down, you would do the flexibility stretch and just try to work out the kinks. It's a good way to kind of check in with the muscle and see what you've done.
Yeah.
I stretch actually a little bit beforehand just to see where I'm sore. And then I have what I call an occlusion stretch. So the idea there is to just basically get into a stretch position and do kind of an auto-regulated intuitive stretch where you're contracting the muscle in the stretch. So you're doing an isometric contraction, but in the angle and in the way that you want in order to maybe, let's say, as an example, you did a bunch of incline chest work and you really didn't hit the lower chest. You might do a stretch where your arms up high, so you're hitting the lower fibers of the more costal fibers of the chest during the stretch to even out the stimulus in that muscle that day. I think one of the things this I noticed as I trained with Dave Henry doing DC training for years, and we both noticed pretty rapidly, it seemed like we got better separation in our quads doing DC training. And one of the things that's done there is a quad stretch. And the way I still do this today, it's not really typically loaded. It's more of an occlusion stretch. Is do kind of a hurdler stretch, they call it sometime. Put your foot back behind you, like on the pad of a lat pull down or something where you can rest the foot. And then, so you have knee flexion, and then you try to get hip extension. So you're driving your hip forward. And when I've done Fortitude training camps, the leg stretching is the thing that's most often neglected. People just don't want to do it. And they don't do it. So we'll finish training legs. I'm like, okay, let's get that stretch in. That can be the worst part of the training. When you get, it's really, you know this, you've done it, right?
Yeah.
You get into that position and you drive the knee back with the knee in flexion, your heel at your butt, and you're really stretching out that rectus femoris. You're getting a stimulus there that is pretty novel. A lot of people don't naturally activate the rectus femoris. And you do that and intentionally contract that while you're trying to extend your knee against an immovable object while you're stretching the hip flexors, the rectus femoris being one of those. You'll create a tremendously novel stimulus in the quad for many, many people. And I think that's what actually gives separation in the quad for the most part, is having a well-developed, sort of, if you think about, that you've got the lateralis and the medialis muscles and the rectus femoris in the middle, those are rounded and big. And then the rectus femoris is developed. So it's having really good development of those muscles so that the rounded muscles create a groove in between, and you see a separation down in the musculature of the quad.
Yeah. And I just wanted to ask about the stretch. Is there like a rule? Because like we sometimes, like even for me, in between sets, I find the stretch sort of just works for me, and I'm able to go into the set, much better if I do my stretches in between. Is it okay to do them in between, or is it only at the end?
The way if you feel like just for your groove and performance, some stretching makes sense just to keep loose. Yes, the occlusion stretch and the extreme stretch are intended to be a stimulus for muscle growth. Basically, that's especially the extreme stretch, the occlusion stretch too. So you're going to have kind of an unknown factor impairing your performance. So let's say you're doing the loading sets and you're zigzagging and you've got a set rest interval. And one day, you do 30 seconds of really hard stretching, and the other day you do 10 seconds. That's a totally different amount of recovery in that what would be a rest interval. So you're kind of throwing off your metric for progressive overload because you've got another stimulus when you should be resting. Yeah. At least, should be the way I, set up you could do whatever you would like to do, but especially the occlusion stretches, it's like, that's a user's choice, basically, how hard you stretch. So if you're doing that sort of intuitively, you're kind of throwing off that you could stretch really hard and like lose 3 reps, even on a day where had you not stretched at all, you would have done much better. So I have those very much at the end because the stretching can actually impair performance. There's, the literature's pretty clear. If they have people, you dampen the stretch receptor, the muscle spindle reflexes. So I like to have that at the end. But if you feel like, man, I got a little kink in my hip or something, and you need to stretch out, then do it by all means. Like don't say I can't stretch, I have to sit here, and rest. When your greater sense says, yeah, I should stretch something out before I go into this next heavy set. You got to be smart too.
So I must say, but reading through your ebook and just from hearing you now, what I really like is that anyone can adapt it to them, which, like you say, not many programs do, and that it really is for longevity. And yeah, again, not all programs are like that, and a lot of people just completely destroy themselves with one program. And rather than thinking, how am I going to use this for longevity and for fun? Like, like when we, just before we started it, we were like really bored, and it does make such a huge difference. You're like, when there's something you're looking forward to, because I mean, we've used principles of everything in your training, but not how you've laid it out. So it's having that enjoyment back makes such a huge difference. And
the last, not to cut you off, but the last piece of recipe that you guys, this will be coming up now, is periodizing how you do the training. So the how long you train before you do a cruise is up to you.
Yeah. No, which is good, and that can change. You can auto-regulate that if you want, or if you, just how it sort of fits into your lifestyle, and then you can just carry on, which is amazing.
It's interesting. And this is, I mean, you go sort of digging towards the research literature. You can see this in some of the few studies that have made progress measurements in the middle of a training period. So oftentimes it's like 8 weeks of training, 12 weeks of training, and we have before and after. And I even alluded to this and mentioned this with the Titan training. And this is what I wanted to avoid with letting people auto-regulate how long they have. I call it a progressive blast. So I stole Dante's term blast and cruise, but progressive blast and intensive cruise, because the deload is set up differently. It's not necessarily a deload, but it's a devolume. And in the research, there are some studies that have actually demonstrated that, let's say it's a 12-week study, between 0 and 6 weeks, you're making progress. And then the progress can actually revert itself. There can be less progress. That's because those people should have had a deload. They should have pulled back at some point. So they had an effective program that they persisted in too long. It's sort of like imagine. This is so silly. But imagine you want to have a study where you see how well people like a particular kind of food. So you give them all a standardized massive amount of the food, and they eat it, and so they eat as much as, and they eat like, oh, that was really good, I'm nice and full. I would give that an 8 out of 10 rating. That was a pretty nice meal. It's like, no, you're not done. You got 2/3 more to eat, and you force feed them until they get to the end, and they're just nauseated, and they feel, and like, how do you rate this? It's like, that's a 0. That was horrible. I'm going to go throw up now. Thank you very much. That was the worst thing ever. So that is what can happen when you get a canned program that says this is what you do for 12 weeks, and you don't step back, or you don't auto-regulate your volume down. Is you miss out on that. And sort of, I set up a generic blast cruise ratio of about 3-to-1. So you could go for 3 weeks, and this actually works out really well, interestingly enough. You could go for 3 weeks and then take a week off, or you could go for 6 weeks and take 2 weeks off. If you stick roughly with that ratio, you don't lose any ground by having a blast. It's not like, because it's still, out of 8 weeks, if you did 3-and-1, 3-and-1, or 6-and-2, it's still 6 weeks of progressive blasting. In fact, if you do it right, when you deload, you spring back. And a lot of people who never really done deloads and are getting a feel for like when and how they should do those, or the way I do it, it works pretty well. They'll come back stronger after the deload. So it's time away from the progression, but it's actually a step forward progress wise, because you basically reap the rewards of the previous work you put in during the progressive blast. So
yeah,
those are the components. That's the recipe, and you can mix it various ways.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think, because you trained yourself into the ground a bit.
Yeah, before I started Fortitude. Well, I also think the vaccine had a part to play because so we got the vaccine instead of resting. I was like, screw this. It's just, yeah. So I pushed it and I dug my hole deeper. So took 2 weeks off and then we started the Fortitude, and the 2 weeks were magical. So
yeah, you come back.
yeah, it just feels nice training now.
Good. Good to hear.
And when it comes, you're quite big on nutrient timing, and could we go into that a little bit? So more sort of your sort of take on nutrition.
Sure. It's one approach that here's the thing, like the big picture on nutrition, kind of in my mind. You take like Weight Watchers has been around for forever, and I don't even know what their success rate is. I have no connection with Weight Watchers in any way, shape, or form, other than knowing they've been around. I mean, probably 40 years or something like that. I can't imagine. I can't remember when Weight Watchers wasn't around. But it's what's that, Andy?
It's longer than I've been alive, and I'm 41. So
yeah. So and I'm 51. So it's been since I was a kid for sure.
Jeez.
Yeah. So, but it's a system, right? And it sort of tells people kind of what to do. So having structure in a diet is, highly important. Even something like, you need to get this many grams of protein in each meal and you need to eat at this time of day. So nutrient timing is just one way of structuring things that seems to work well for people. It kind of tells you when you're going to have certain kinds of meals. You would have your meals that have a greater caloric surplus around the times when you're training. So nutrient timing is not just having an intra workout. It's actually timing the nutrient based on all sorts of things. So having something in the morning when you wake up, just sort of, if someone who's having trouble making gains, you haven't had any food coming in, you probably got something in your bloodstream, depending on how late you ate before you went to bed. But having something to break your fast, your breakfast, is a good idea for someone. Just to have some protein pacing going on there, have protein coming in throughout the day, and be able to fit in the nutrients that you need. So if you're eating an excess of calories and having trouble fitting all those things in, probably not the smartest idea just to try to put 2 giant 2,000 calorie meals in at once. Spreading the calories out helps. So having an early meal makes sense just to get ahead of the game as the day goes on. The nutrient timing idea then, as it relates to like an intra workout, or I call it a peri-workout recovery supplementation period, is basically just, and this fits, the research is mixed on this, and the underlying physiology or nutritional ideas here is simply to have the recovery process started as soon as possible, and we do that using food. So for instance, if someone ate a sizable meal an hour before they train, and that has no impact on how they're training, it doesn't make them feel nauseated or what have you, they're going to have elevated insulin levels, they're going to have available carbohydrate, glucose, they're going to have protein, amino acids. I see a pup.
Yeah.
And
sorry, it's like a squirrel for me. Yeah. So they have an intra workout available in the form of that meal that they've taken in. So that may work perfectly for someone because they just don't want to be bothered with drinking something in the workout. Most people will find, if they give it a go, at least in my experience, if they do add an intra workout, your stomach will adapt to this. Generally, you can get better at handling that food coming in. Mm-hmm. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, you may be, and this is how I sort of first started doing this years ago, and that it's obvious to kind of go with the easy example is when I was taking in what's been kind of the highest number of calories, when I would do like 6,000 calories a day. And that would be like 6 1,000 calorie meals. So I had to start early. Yeah. And what I found worked was I'd have, maybe the third 1,000 calorie meal of the day, 2 hours beforehand. And then instead of, let's say I have that meal, let's say I trained at 3. I could do that sometimes when I had my gym, for instance. I have the meal at 1, and then I could start training. And if I trained from, let's say, 3 to 4:30 or 5, and then tried to put in the other 3,000 calories between 5 and 10, that was tough, as opposed to taking in 1,000 calories in an intra workout and then having a meal at 6 and 9, another 2,000 calorie meals, 2,000 over those two, because I was basically multitasking. It's simply a matter of getting those calories in throughout the day, and I can handle the 1,000 calories. And that's where a highly branched cyclic dextrin, using a hydrolyzed protein, something that is easily digestible, easily assimilated, basically, because it's already pre-digested for you. But you don't have to do those things. If you're, you can actually find, there's studies that demonstrate an effect just from like 6 grams of essential amino acids will positively impact protein synthesis after a workout. So if you're someone who, wants to use a scoop of whey and, 25 grams of carbs just to have something there because you've got a half an hour drive home, and you feel like you get pretty hungry if you don't, that's fine too. You don't need to use, you could just use even a whey concentrate if your stomach's okay with it. You could use a whey isolate and maltodextrin, which is very, very cheap, at least here in the States, and be just fine with that. So the idea, physiologically, is to have the nutrients there. And I always sort of use an example. Let's say you train chest, shoulders, and triceps, and you do calves and abs on that day too. And then you do like a little bit of a cardio, kind of a warm down thing, because you just throw a little extra activity in. So your workout starts at 3, you train chest, you're done with chest at 3:25 or 3:30. And then you finish the other muscles by 4 o'clock. And then you get off the treadmill by 4:30. And then you have your drink like right away. And then you've got some gastric lag time. So it's about 4:45 before you've got nutrients coming in that are going to be serving for recovery of the chest muscle, which you trained over an hour before that. You're actually jump-starting the recovery process by taking those nutrients during the workout because you have them there. So you're recovering from them. You're basically serving the recovery process for those muscles you trained at the beginning of the workout by having the intra workout there. And it, for lots of people who got to drive home from the gym or what have you, then especially let's say someone eats at noon or 1 and they train at 5 and they would be just starving by the time they got home. This is a way to at least like take the hunger off. Yeah. So there's numerous reasons, just practically speaking, why you would want to do that. The data does actually show there's some good studies, and they're cherry picked. I think it's somewhere between 100 and 102 on the Muscle Minds episodes. I go into some of these nutrient timing studies, and there are a couple studies that have demonstrated when, at least from the dietary recalls, calories were the same, nutrition was the same. There's no difference in overall macronutrient calorie intake, but the timing in and of itself made a difference for gains over the course of a training period. So the way I look at this, and it's an interesting, it's an important another sort of dip into the science, is that when you see a scientific publication that compared 2 groups, a control group and an experimental group, and you don't see a difference between the means there, you run the statistics, there's no statistical difference. We use our standardly accepted probability of 5% or less that we made it incorrectly, made it a statistical error there. Then the scientists will be able to say that we wouldn't expect that there's a difference between these 2 treatments, the control versus whatever we gave to the experimental group. And that is something we can generalize to the public. But that doesn't mean that there weren't individuals for whom that would have been an effective way to go about things to make improvements. And if you see the individual data, you will see that it's a bell curve. There's going to be outliers and there's going to be people on either end. I just have to introduce this study that I like to talk about. You guys have probably heard me talk about it, but it was beautiful because these researchers they did such a nice job. So in the initial study, they wanted to look at basically frequency and volume, and whether that plays a role in muscle gains. And they used a really nice experimental model where they trained one leg one way and the other leg another way. So the same subject. So you have basically, it's like doing twin groups, but it's the same person. So everything else is the same, even their diet's the same, exactly, because it's the same individual. So the diet for both legs is the same. Imagine that, right? So they varied both volume and frequency. So we can't say, which was the most important factor here, but one leg got trained 5 times a week for 3 sets of like 8 to 12. And the other leg was trained 2 times a week for 3 sets of 8 to 12 to failure, just knee extensions. So they're just looking at the quad, and they looked at muscle growth. And in the first study, compared all those groups, the gains were the same. Didn't make a difference. Volume and frequency is the same. Nada, no difference. Then they went and they looked, because they were working with these people and they had the individual data, and they went and they examined the individual responses. And what they did was they plotted these. And you'll see if you look at the Muscle Minds podcast, we got the visuals there. 5 times versus, they just grouped the 2 or 3 times together. And about 1/3 of the people did better in terms of muscle growth with the 5 times per week training. About 1/3 of the people did better with the 2 or 3 times a week training. And 1/3 of the people, it didn't matter. There are some people who were extreme responders, and there was one subject that didn't respond in either case. Nothing worked. They're kind of a non-responder in this case. So, but if you looked at the first study, you would say, it doesn't matter. Like the science, quote unquote, proves it. And this is exactly why I always am a little wary of someone who says, especially in a very soft science, a biological science like exercise science, that you've proven something, because you don't prove things when you're using the statistical analyses that are used in a biological science. You're just creating evidence that points you in one direction. You can do a proof in mathematics. You might be able to prove something in a court of law, or in physics, you could prove the existence of a particle because it once was there, but you're not proving anything. And here we have it. It's like there was if you looked at that first study, it would say it proved there was no difference. Well, that would be false to say, because for that person who did much better with the 5 times, they obviously had a very different experience. So that wasn't proof for them.
Yeah.
So the same thing holds for the nutrient timing, I think. For some people, especially if you look, you can get an idea. If someone, hasn't eaten for a long time, they eat at noon, they don't eat during their workout, they've got a long drive home, they get home, they sit, they say hello to the family, et cetera, and it's, 2 hours afterwards. And there's even some studies showing that you'll impair gains if you wait too long. A little bit of research of that idea. That person is probably going to do really well with an intra workout, just simply to get the calories in. For some people, the timing effect matters. So it's a matter of like, and of course, what I've had clients before who are running on budgets to just use whey concentrate and dextrose for their intra workout when they're trying to gain, and their GI got used to it. They didn't start off with a 2,000 calorie shake. That would be a gastric disaster. But they work their way into that, because that's what and actually that can end up being cheaper than food sometimes, given how how low that costs nowadays. At least in the States, it's easy to get. So that's kind of the general story on the nutrient timing. I like it because it allows someone to structure and sort of progressively move their food up. So example, post show, someone might have a diet that's been very, very low in carbohydrates, and we want to kind of reverse diet them out. What I typically will do is say, if this works for them, it makes sense. Maybe it worked in the past, they're used to this pattern. We'll progressively overload, so to speak, the food that's taken in during the workout. So have a big solid intra workout, and then the next big meal would be a bigger one. And then when they stop, that would inch their weight upwards and move things, an appropriate pace. So the muscle gain or regain is making pace somewhere, that makes sense. They're not gaining 20 pounds a week or 20 pounds in a month. And then you add to that first meal in the post-workout recovery period. And then when they stop making gains there, you might add in the second meal. And I've taken clients and just added into that period where they're taking massive amounts of food, but those other days would stay just pretty much the same. Those would be kind of unchanged. Assuming it doesn't create like incredible hunger where it's, distracting and they can't work.
Yeah.
So it just gives you a structure to add food, and then you might add food on those non-training days. Maybe at the same time of day because you've set up a circadian rhythm. That works really well. It's kind of cool actually. Or during the time of day when someone has more appetite. So it's like, you know what? I don't want to add more in this post-workout and intra-workout period, but I'm kind of hungry at noon. That seems like it's the meal when my body's telling me I need a little more food. So you would add food to your non-training day noon lunchtime meal. So, but that's how I would use that as a structural component for varying the diet. And then I keep that in place. Typically, I keep the post-workout and peri-workout recovery meals in place during a dietary period. So you're kind of matching what the body needs, so to speak. So you've trained and you've put into motion the process of building muscle, especially in the off season, or at least remodeling the muscle. So you have an increased metabolic need for protein. Your protein synthesis turned on. You might as well work with that, taking those nutrients there, and as long as it's not hurting, that's one way to structure it. And you can kind of like, okay, so where's the data? Like, what do you kind of say with this? Well, imagine the situation where you're like, you know what? I'm just going to do the exact opposite of that. I'm going to have on like as far spaced away from my meals or from my training periods, lots of food. And then I'm going to have nothing for 5 hours before I train. I'm going to train at night. I'm not going to eat until the next day. So you don't have any food coming in for recovery. Yeah, you're like, oh God, that's a terrible idea.
It sounds horrible.
Yeah. So that, that's one way to sort of like, analyze whether it makes sense to work in that fashion. So that's kind of like my take on nutrient timing in regards to the peri-workout recovery supplementation idea.
Interesting. Andy, have you got any questions your end?
Loads, just follow them. No, none that I can think of because we've covered like loads of stuff. You just sort of already. I'm just trying to think what we wrote down on the list of questions, and
what do we have left?
Kind of answered
of the listed questions. But what was on your website, Scott, that was really interesting is that you said Western science, Eastern medicine. What is does that fit in with your acupuncture? Do you still practice that?
Yeah, I have to be careful. I maintain my license. I will eventually probably go back to that. When I have a friend who like hurts their ankle, or every once in a while, my family members, what have you, I'll treat people. I've got my dogs actually have an acupuncture vet that we use. So yeah, we use Chinese medicine there.
It works really well on dogs as well.
Oh yeah, works phenomenally well.
I had it on Honey, my dog that died last month. Years ago, she got hit by a warthog and her tail went a bit droopy. We did acupuncture.
Oh, right on. Yeah.
It worked really well. Yeah.
Yeah, there's the acupuncture and then there's the herbs. Like the Chinese medicine is a complete system of medicine.
Yeah.
So I have to be careful because I can't practice telemedicine with Chinese medicine. Like there's even a specific ruling in Florida. Like a guy had petitioned to want to be able to like read. You can read tongues in Chinese medicine. You look at someone's tongue, and like some people, yeah, I know they're experts at reading the tongue. It's like actually, if you get good enough at reading a tongue, too, it used to be like back when I was in school, especially, and I was really used to like reading tongues. I'd be like, okay, I don't want to know. Like I learned too much just from looking at your tongue. Put your tongue out. Like, wow, you really are unhealthy. Like, oh my gosh, you're really blood deficient. That tongue is really pale.
Your tongue's so white.
You've got a lot of dampness. The coat on your tongue was really thick. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, I need to stop that, So you can't do too much, but it's I look into those things. So like, for instance, I can, suggest people use like, there's some Ayurvedic herbs from Himalaya Herbal, which I mentioned in my Be Your Own Bodybuilding Coach book. Use those. There are some there are some, you can get a lot of Chinese herbs on Amazon. So there are some things that, you know, I will suggest, I very specifically say, this is not coming from well, you're not my acupuncture patient. So I have to be careful when I do that. But that's what I, you know, hope to do is eventually be able to like have enough time. I'm too busy with other things because things just kind of come my way. I'm very lucky in that way to be able to have a small, like part-time practice where I can work with people too.
Yeah.
In that regard, because I mean, like some of the things, like I when I go into supplementation, for instance, just thinking about herbs in my Be Your Own Bodybuilding Coach book, some people are like, you know, your supplements don't work. You know, there's only a handful of supplements with really good efficacy study supporting them. You know, creatine, you know, if you don't look at ergogenic aids like beta alanine, maybe bicarbonate, those sorts of things, you know. But if you look at what a bodybuilder is doing, or someone who's dieting down for shows in any of the physique divisions, you know, having a healthy GI system is paramount for making gains for someone who's really trying to push their physiological limits. If you can't get the food in, you're not going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
If you're dieting down and you can't sleep, having a good sleep remedy is really, really important. You know, taking care of your microbiome. So, you know, that's where there's some Chinese herbal formulas that can be helpful. And some you can't really shotgun those, and be wary of someone who does suggest that to you. You can't really say, you know, you've got insomnia, I'm going to give you chest this. There is one herb, I'm not even going to say what it is, that sometimes people can use because it helps people fall asleep. It helps a good bit for most people, but it's a very specific diagnosis. So you come up with a pattern in Chinese medicine. You feel the pulses, you look at the tongue, you do what's called a 10 questions, where you ask about everything from how they sleep to their sex drive to what their poop looks like, you know, you name it.
Yeah.
And then you say, okay, this is the formula that we need. These are the points that we need. And you holistically tackle the problem from that perspective. So it's hard to do that, you know, with someone who's overseas or in another state. So, but I have a lot of sort of Eastern influence, I think, into my thinking, you know, which probably just, you know, it's there.
Yeah.
It's embedded in what I do.
Well, it's funny now, though. Everyone wants to look at their tongue quickly in the mirror. It's burning to look at my tongue and check it out quickly.
Well, I tell you, like there's you can also do facial analysis. Like one of my instructors back when I was in school, apprenticed with someone who was an expert in reading the face. So, you know, there's various features you can come up with the face, and you can do a 5-element analysis on people: wood, fire, earth, metal, and water are the 5 elements. And you can tell people, like, you do a constitutional analysis based on that. And he said when he was doing his training, and he uses this in his practice, he'd have to be careful because, you know, you can just look at someone, you're like having a nice conversation, you're making eye contact, and you're doing all the things exactly. But then he's seeing all this stuff. He's like, he's reading all. It's like he's reading the person's mind, you know, and he knows more than he wants. And like every once in a while, he said he'd be walking down the street, and someone he's like, "Whoa, I didn't want to know that." Like, okay, he'd have to mind his own business to some degree because you could see so much in those folks.
Yeah, I can imagine. But I really like that. It should be a holistic approach. And you know, I don't know much about Chinese herbs and everything, but I think that's really interesting. But like you say, you've got to, for some of those things you need to be in person. I mean, well, the name of my business is Integrative Bodybuilding. You know, so it's like integrative medicine. So I try to like bring in all ways of thinking. So I have a bit like a whole chapter in my book is ways of knowing. Yeah. So
there are certain ways, like a really good example is blood flow restriction training.
Yeah.
So the Japanese, he's a researcher who basically came up with Katsu training. Sato is his last name, I believe. He intuited that. It just came to him. He's like, if I recall, I'm trying to recall now because I have the paper where there's like kind of a historical perspective paper that he's written, and he was I think he was like sitting, you know, Indian style, or maybe in a lotus position or something like that. And he, noticed like that's a meditative thing, and you have to sort of watch the pain as a third person perhaps, and sort of see how it is. And I think it came to him as like, this is a muscular stress that's ischemic based, and there's pain there. Yeah. And he's like, I think it just, he intuited that could be added to muscular contractions to create a greater stimulus for muscle growth. And they'll use the Katsu clinics in Japan. There's entire clinics that are based on blood flow restriction as a way to rehabilitate and work around injuries, or to try to maintain muscle mass. For instance, in older folks who have been really sedentary for a long while, they will do blood flow restriction while they're walking on a treadmill, and you can evoke muscle mass increases that way. So just because the blood flow restriction causes fatigue, then the muscles are required, the nervous system is required to use a novel activation pattern and use more muscle mass than you would otherwise. You get more loading on more motor units, and those motor units then will respond by growing. And he intuited all of that, and that kind of came to him. I don't know if it wasn't in a dream. Like, I mean, heck, the polymerase chain reaction. Kerry Mullins is the guy who figured that out. I think he was on a trip. I think he was on an LSD trip when he was driving along in Hollywood, and it came to him, and then he knew, like, this is how we can do this. And the PCR is used far and wide now. He got a Nobel Prize, and then I think he retired, and now he was a surfer for a while, at least after that. But so there's different ways you can know things, and those can come to you. And sometimes, a lot of times bodybuilders have figured things out long before the scientists have kind of brought them into practice. And this is where guys like, for instance, Brad Schoenfeld is great, because he was a trainer for so long, and he competed himself a little bit, and, but he knows, like, he's done so many studies, like, does fasted cardio matter? So many things, his insights, things he studies comes from having been in the trenches and had to figure those things out. So that's taking from Western medicine, Eastern medicine, your intuition, what you just think is right, what someone else may have told you, and like all those things can serve you in some way, shape, or form. So like integrating things is really, really big for me, especially like that's why I think that study is so great, because you looked at that first study and they just left it at that. Most studies just tell you what would happen on average, but there's no average person. Responses are all different, and they followed up and they published that. And that's so vital to know, is just because if you have 8 studies, think of it this way, this is being positive, and optimistic, which I like to be. But if you have 8 studies and only one of them shows a positive effect, well, then it worked for somebody. It worked for one of those 8 studies. It doesn't mean it's going to be like, it's going to work for everyone. We can say that with good certainty. And it's not going to be I wouldn't spend, your life's fortune on that supplement, or, dive into that approach, but it may very well be something you can take from. So that could be integrated in some way, shape, or form. So that's the way I like to use the science, because, individuals, or bodybuilders are individuals, and they're training with their individual training programs, as opposed to if bodybuilding were like truly a team sport where you're like, okay, we got to pick the training program and I got 20 people I got to train. Well, then those studies would be much more applicable, because that's how you'd have to kind of do it. Like, I can't like have everyone doing a different volume tier and different types of, pump sets and everything else. So that integrative approach is really, really important. In Chinese medicine is one thing that, when I like to at least point people to that. I send lots of people to acupuncturists locally so they can work through the things, because I say, oh, that's a Chinese medicine thing, man. Go see someone. They're going to probably tell you this, and you can get that fixed. Like tennis and golf elbow. I'll tell you a funny story while I'm on a good ramble here. There was when I was in school, I learned Tui Na is the body work that I do with 2 years of Tui Na. So lots of, very much like massage. It's actually a lot like ART, as it turns. I think ART may have borrowed from the Tui Na that I do. And so I was doing practice hours on anyone, and of course they hated that. I was personal training at a gym, kind of part-time, and I would go to I'm like, hey, do you mind if I work on? He's like, oh, I guess if I have to get another massage, I guess I'll do it. And I would practice whatever technique. Yeah, they hated me. And one of my best friends, his name's Mike Gustafson, lives back in Arizona still. He had, I don't know if it was tennis elbow or golf elbow, and it had been bothering him. And there was a Western physician, a surgeon, who used to come in and train in the gym, and Mike would kind of chat with him on the gym floor. And this guy was very very set, very smart guy. He was very accomplished, but Western medicine was his way of thinking through things. He didn't know much about Chinese medicine, so that was that. And he had his way of training. He had like he was, and I like this, but it's an interesting phenomenon. I think I see guys that I think maybe were engineers or have retired, who are very, very smart, and they go in the gym and they do these really novel, unique things. You seen this before? Yeah, and yeah. And he liked to he would do like bench presses that were way above his 1 rep max for like 3 or 4 inches. Just thought the heavier the better, and like it's like if he went down 2 more inches, that's the end of his rib cage.
Yeah.
So I remembered him because he was like, "Oh my God, we're gonna be calling 911." Like, oh, okay, he got the rep. Thank goodness. Okay, I could put the phone down. That's kind of what it was. So I remembered him, and Mike. He was talking with Mike, and I think Mike asked him like, what do you think of my tennis elbow? And he's like, oh, just rest and take some non-steroidal anti-inflammatories. And it's like, okay, so Mike came, and literally Mike was always really responsive to whatever I did. And I think I want to say I treated him only one time or maybe twice, just with Twaina.
Yeah.
Went away, it was gone.
Wow.
The next week, the guy comes in, for his regular workout, and the topic comes up, and she's like, how's that golfer's elbow or tennis elbow going? He's like, oh, it's gone. He's like, oh, the NSAID's worked. He's like, no, my friend Scott, he did body work on it. He's like, what? He's like, did body work on it. It went away. He's like, no, it doesn't. No, it didn't. That doesn't work. He's like, no, it really does. He's like, no, it doesn't. He's like, he said, no, that is not the case. That did not happen. It can't be. And Mike had it for like 3 months, and all of a sudden, like, it was like gone, and like literally it was gone within like 3 days. It was like, I mean, it could have been coincidental, I guess, but the chances are pretty low.
Yeah.
But he just flat out refused to admit that. Like he couldn't bring that into his paradigm, and that's okay. But I remembered it was really sort of funny. So I think we can miss out on things. And like when I went to acupuncture school, I was a college professor. I just finished my PhD and my postdoc, and I'm doing research. And I'm like, show me the data about all this stuff you're saying works.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, the data is that people have been doing this for thousands of years.
Yeah.
And whether it's a placebo effect or what have you. So if people have been doing things for a while, chances are there's something there. The mechanism could be placebo. The mechanism could be physiologically. The mechanism could be something that's, as of yet unrevealed, but it's worth at least considering. So I kind of try to keep an open mind.
It works, whether it's placebo or not. If you get benefit, it's like,
yeah. There's actually a guy named Ted Kapchuk. I've mentioned this several times on podcasts, but it's pretty cool. He wrote one of the best overview books. If you want to learn a little about Chinese medicine, The Web That Has No Weaver is a book that you can get on Amazon. Ted Kapchuk. And he now has gone on to research. He started doing, I think, in conjunction with acupuncture, but he's now a researcher digging into the mechanisms underlying the placebo effect.
Oh,
and and there's like 30 genes or so that are involved where they've been able to demonstrate that the genotype of determines the susceptibility to the placebo effect of individuals.
Gosh, that is really interesting.
It's very cool. So like catecholomethyltransferase is a big gene. There's been several studies there, and that's involved in breaking down dopamine. So dopamine is an excitatory neurotransmitter in the brain, and the placebo effect is connected to expectancies. It's like what you think will work. So it's like, imagine 2 people. One is like, they believe nothing. They think you're trying to fool them all the time. And the other one is like, oh, that sounds awesome. Let's do that shit. Let's make that shit happen. Right? Well, there's the underlying that, those, may or may not be the case, but underlying those different types of worldviews, so to speak, or approaches to things, is going to be the level of excitability in their brain. And this catechol methyltransferase, COMT enzyme, has different activities based on which gene you have for that. And if you have higher activities, you break down dopamine more rapidly. So the dopamine levels don't stay elevated. So you're not as excitable, and your expectancies of like how fun something's going to be, or whether someone tells you something's going to happen, are going to be diminished. The psychological influences of someone in a authority position are going to be less. So if I say like, oh man, this Fortitude training, you guys, weeds, literally, you're going to be wanting to spray pesticide on yourselves because you're going to be growing too fast. You're not going to know what to do. And you're like, oh my God, like Scott told me this. And, Dr. Scott, doctor, he says he must know. So you believe it. And of course it's going to happen because it's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. Well, they've actually found that's a really important gene. And you can actually, there's a drug, they've done a trial actually with a drug that can inhibit the COMT. But when you do that, then you reduce the breakdown of dopamine, you elevate dopamine levels, and you enhance the placebo effect.
Nice.
So vitamin E does that as well. Vitamin E actually inhibits COMT. And there's a couple other supplements that can. So like the thing that I'm, thinking that, will be probably a pharmacological, and this is mentioned in the paper, this is not my idea, is to co-administer. So you have, like, for instance, antidepressants. One of the things they're trying to figure out is antidepressants have started working better in the past decade or two. And that happened to coincide with, especially in the States, it becoming legal to advertise for drugs. So, a lot of depressed people in the US. And I don't know if you guys, I don't have a TV, but I know of these commercials. And you're watching the Super Bowl or you're watching whatever, and all of a sudden this advertisement comes on. It's like you see someone who's really kind of sad, and it's like, oh, your life's not going the way you should, and there's a way out. There's a way that you can make this happen. It's use our antidepressant, and then the next scene is the person's like, skipping through the tulips, and the dog's chasing them, and the butterflies are all around and everything's wonderful. And then they give you all the side effects. But those commercials are widespread, and those have been connected with people's expectancies regarding antidepressants. They're like, it used to be like, oh, the doctor's like giving me this antidepressant, and I really don't even want to take it because it's like, God, I need an antidepressant. What's wrong with me? It was like, oh no, everyone's taking them. Like, I just saw it. I've seen 5 commercials in the last 3 days on antidepressants. Yeah. So now there's an expectancy and a different social stigma, and antidepressants are working better because there's an enhanced placebo effect because you really believe they're going to work.
Yeah.
So, and I don't even want to say this now, but there's so much related to supplement companies selling stuff. If you think something's going to work because, every living Mr. Olympia told you it's going to work, then it's going to work. Right. Because look how huge they are. Yeah. So, but you could co-administer drugs with other drugs to enhance the placebo effect. So some drugs, work because there's a placebo effect. The placebo is the best, most effective drug there is. So, but if you can pharmacologically manipulate what's going on in the brain that changes your expectancy in association with those drugs, you can make drugs work because of their mechanism of action, or whatever they may be. A lot of times we don't even know, and or because they're expectant and they're thus having a better placebo effect. And then you get a 2-for-1, and that's a smarter way, I think, to use drugs. At least you can do that with more side effects along the way. Then that's something over the future. And I guess you could. I'd much rather see them spiking protein powder with vitamin, which actually have effects on gains because it can quench the stress. If they'll start having COMT inhibiting drugs that you find in your creatine, I don't know, but anyway, there's something to say for believing in something working, so if it works, it works, and I'm okay with placebo effect being behind almost everything, as long as you're not like knowingly robbing from someone, pilfering, charging them massive amounts when you're knowingly giving them a placebo, and just like kind of cheesing them into believing it's going to work because you're such a good salesperson. I'm not big on that, but it's good to think things are going to work. So
it really is the power of the mind. That's interesting. We'll definitely look that book up.
Yeah, I've already put it in Amazon cart. Probably get it.
Yeah, it's a Kindle for like $10, I think.
Oh, we'll get it then.
Yeah, and I can send you that paper. Oh, sorry, Andy, I didn't hear you.
I'm saying everything's on Kindle nowadays, guys. Come on.
No, but for us, sometimes with the region, some books we don't get them, so it's usually I just order the paperback, and I don't mind it. So
right,
yeah,
I like paperback too.
Yeah,
nice to have a bookshelf.
Yeah.
It takes a long time for things to get out here. That's the problem.
Yeah.
To ship them out. But I think that's it for this podcast anyway. But that was really fascinating. Thank you so much, Scott, for taking the time to come onto our podcast. And haven't read your book yet, but that will be next on the list as well. But we'll put.
I've got your book. I've got your book back in London though. I'll bring the book and you can have it because I've had it a little while. Be your own bodybuilding coach book. So I'll
send you guys the PDF if you like. I'll just send it to you. So you can read through it.
Oh, yeah, I see.
Yeah, you can. And it's clickable too. So.
Awesome.
Well,
you guys can have. Yeah. Oh, of course, no problem.
Really appreciate that. And
because who knows? Like how long it's on Amazon, but it might. So the PDF will be there in a millisecond.
Oh yeah, true.
True. But yeah, we'll definitely we'll try and find that YouTube of the muscle rounds. We'll put that there, and we are really enjoying the Fortitude training so far, and learned a lot from you today. So yeah, thanks again.
You got Fortitude stuff and post it on Instagram. Tag me. I'm interested to see what you guys have.
Oh yeah. Yeah, nice little container.
Yeah. I thought about putting him in a container, like just my truck camper on a flatbed and Jim. I think is your container.
It's
20 big one. 20 or 40.
It's
a big one.
Oh, okay, that's a big one.
Yeah.
20 foot.
No, it's 20 foot. It's not 40.
You got the outside space as well.
Yeah.
Because the space outside is a 20 by 20, but we have one that's the container and then one partially outdoor. So yeah.
We'll take some videos and we will tag you.
I should have some.
Yeah, I because that's really interesting to me. I like to see what you guys have. Have you seen the gyms? Sorry, I just want to gyms that people have made out of all wood, just with
those, yeah. Wooden discs.
There's a guy in Africa.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we have a couple. Yeah,
I've not seen them.
Well,
I've heard people COVID.
Mm-hmm.
During COVID and dumbbells and stuff.
Yeah. There's a guy, Scott got tagged. McNally was tagged. There's a guy, I think he's in Michigan actually, who has some really cool stuff. It's probably made it all out of wood. And it's all smooth. It's amazing. You would think like the wood's going to crack and what have you. But like, and he's really good woodworker though. He's really pretty impressive.
Imagine buying weights that had some moisture in.
Yeah.
To dry down. The plate's got lighter.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm getting so wrong.
Because here it's a lot of cement weights, with old paint buckets and so not much wood, but cement.
You can buy the plastic cast on.
And then old metal water pipes, and you have your barber.
Right.
But like Kenya is doing ingenious trying to, like during COVID, there's more companies in gym equipment and things, local welders.
Yeah.
There's a guy, Tristan Coburn. I did a talk at his gym during the week of the Olympia, and all of his stuff, but it's really nice. It's all custom made. There's a welder. I think the guy's in New Jersey maybe, and he made all of his equipment for him.
Wow.
Everything's personalized. I don't know. I'm guessing it was pretty expensive, but maybe not. I don't know. You buy a mill, and if you got a good welder who can just put it all together, but it's pretty cool. Pretty nice. And like just little things. Say it again.
I had a pendulum squat built by a local guy.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's the same. We'll get our leg press with the hack squat combo done locally, because shipping is just crazy expensive, and he's a bodybuilder and a good workman, so he knows all the dimensions, and he's really good.
Yeah, well, this is great.
You can there's a thought, a guy here locally, and I haven't seen his stuff. I need to talk to him. His name's Paul Revelia. I'll just mention him. He's a coach. Great. I think he has maybe two. But he has it's kind of hammer strength knockoff stuff that's pretty good. Wow. But he got it from China. And you have to order like a lot, like $20,000, like a kind of a full gym. But he got like probably hammer strength stuff, $150,000 for, I don't know, I can't remember the numbers, so I don't want to like misquote what he said, but it's totally so. Yeah. But I think you have to order a large, like a dozen pieces or something.
Yeah. We can do that, Andy.
Yeah, we just come together and buy everything.
Yeah.
Our
gym club.
Really bad on this end. Sorry if we're breaking up.
I think guys are on Netflix.
Are those in the background?
They're tree frogs.
Tree frogs. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
They've just woken up.
I think
are they toxic?
No. They're cute.
They're really tiny.
They're not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's everyone, even Scott McNally was like, what are these?
And then I don't know if you can hear that.
It's weird.
Like
yeah.
That's called a hyrax.
Hyrax?
Yeah, they're very cute, not like how they sound.
What are they?
They're like they look like prairie dogs or groundhogs. Okay.
But they live in the
trees. Scream.
And then the tree, and
they live in the trees.
And are they mating call? What are they?
I think they're male calls to show their territory.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yes.
One of the frogs sound familiar because there's some frogs here, and when I lived in Arizona, there were Colorado river toads.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
That would come out. They literally would hibernate in the ground. They'd come out, especially when it rained, and then it was time to procreate, and they would just go bonkers. And literally, they'd wake me up at night outside my house because there's hundreds of them just going to town.
I think even this is subtle. This is
well, it's almost our rainy season here. Like it's building up for rain, so these guys are like.
Oh, yeah. So this is malls, and they're they're gonna have sex, and then they'll have the eggs will go in the water when there's water to same.
Yep. So there's a small pond out here, so they're living their best.
Okay.
Mhm.
The river toads and the toads, the bofu toads here in Florida, they're toxic. They produce toxins on their skin. So dogs can lick them and end up dying and get too much.
Oh no.
But, yeah.
The toads here are a little bit just to dogs, but I don't think it kills them. We just get that really drooly mouth and we keep vomiting up.
Oh, it is.
I don't know.
Yeah, Suki.
You do it once or twice before we learn.
Yeah, they learn, right? Yeah, they figure. Suki did it once when I was in Colorado, and you can membranes in the mouth, so you just have to wash it out with the hose, and that will. And I love to do that. She was outside barking. She just like bark at lizards or bugs or whatever. So she's kind of barking. And it was treat time for the night, and I didn't hear so I figured she was still out there, and I went out, and this thing it paralyzes the dogs, and she's there, she's face to face with the toad, licking on, and she's paralyzed. She's going, she still wants something, and her whole body is in rigor from this.
Wow.
And yeah, I had to pick her up, and I had to pry her mouth open, spray out of her mouth as best I could, like 10 minutes of just washing it out. Half an hour later, she probably would have died. Dogs die that way of her size, and she probably licked the heck out of that toad. Half an hour later, she was fine. Nothing's going on. It's just in and out. But she had a nice trip in between time. It's a hallucinogen too. So yeah. She's a king toad. Said, don't do that again.
Yeah. Oh, geez.
Okay. Well, you guys are awesome. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
You're
thanks
welcome.
a lot, Scott. And yeah, we will be looking forward to seeing more pictures of your cool gym.
Yeah, on the road.
On the road.
Yes. Yeah. As soon as I can. Thing is shower day. Yeah. And then I got to mount that sucker in there. So we'll enjoy the rest of your.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks,
Thanks
Scott.
so
You
much.
too. Have a great day.
All right. Bye.
Bye.